So if anybody had been paying attention to this podcast for any serious amount of time, you'd probably notice that it's really just kind of come off of a sabbatical. There were reasons for that. Part of it was retooling. There are other reasons that I might talk about eventually, but I'm not going to right now. But the reason why I bring it up is because there are some topics that I had been wanting to bring up and talk about, for quite a long time now. Over the last year, I had been kind of wishing that I had the opportunity to sit down and record a segment talking about them. Unfortunately, these topics have actually stayed pretty current over that whole period of time, and so now I do get to still talk about this one. And this one in particular had to do with the NHL, and it started as a matter related to these Pride Night jerseys. These special jerseys that these teams would do. And they would do them in rainbow colors, and they would take them at the end of the night. They would wear them in warm-up, so at the end of the night they would take them and they would auction them off, and they would give all of the proceeds to some local LGBTQ charity. It was just a really good thing to do for that community, and something that I'd always been pretty supportive of. But I had to rethink certain aspects of that when we saw the public backlash against one player for simply declining to participate in it. And so that player was Ivan Provorov of the Philadelphia Flyers. He's now Ivan Provorov of the Columbus Blue Jackets. They traded him in the offseason. But he basically stepped forward and he said, well, I have very strong beliefs, and, I can't wear something like that on my body and still be true to those beliefs. Nobody has to like those beliefs, but he has the right to have them. I don't like them myself necessarily, but he does have the right to have them. And so if he decides that he doesn't want to wear something on his body that doesn't correspond to his beliefs, well, shucks, he has the right to decline. It's his body, his choice. And the people that objected to him declining to wear this jersey, they accept that argument in relation to other things. So it kind of feels like, yeah, you have to accept it now. But of course, these people, being the sorts of people that they are, they're not happy to accept that. And so there was, I wouldn't even say like a widespread public backlash against Ivan Provorov, but there was a small backlash from a very connected community, very connected group of people, very privileged. They have a lot of access. And so they came out and they demanded all sorts of punishments be levied upon Ivan Provorov. And of course, none of them happened, because the NHL was pretty much, neither the NHL nor the Philadelphia Flyers are in any kind of a position to punish him for exercising those rights. So after he refused, there were a few other players that also refused. James Reimer, who was with the San Jose Sharks at that point, he refused. And then there were additional demands that he be punished, none of which could be acted upon. And then Eric and Mark Stahl in Florida likewise stood up and said, yeah, no, this is not within our beliefs. We're not going to do this either. Within the hockey media, there were all kinds of people that were making various demands that the league should levy some kind of punishment against these players, for daring to stick to beliefs that they don't like, but that the players themselves have every right to hold. And so in time, the NHL did what was probably the only real thing that they could realistically do. They just said, it's like, you know what? We're not going to approve these things anymore. The league had the right of approval over any kind of a specialized jersey or anything like that a team might use in their warm-ups before a night like this. And they just said, you know what? We're not going to approve these things anymore. We're not going to have them, so that the busybodies that are sitting around trying to paying attention to this stuff, trying to identify the holdouts so that they can be harassed and pursued online, we're not going to empower that. And make no mistake about it, it was pretty obvious that the players were being monitored for compliance or non-compliance. Because Ivan Provorov is hardly a superstar in this sport, but he didn't take the warm-up for the Philadelphia Flyers that particular night And somebody noticed that. Ivan Provorov didn't take the warm-up on Pride Night in the Pride jersey, and somebody was paying close enough attention to make a big fuss about it. So for just a few seconds, put yourself in the shoes of Gary Bettman. You're the NHL commissioner. You don't even have the power to punish these guys for having their own beliefs, and you shouldn't, even if you did have that power. What else can you do to deal with this situation? Well, you've got a bunch of people, some of them in the access media, that are acting like a bunch of children. So realistically, the only thing that you can do is you punish them the same way that you would if you're a kindergarten teacher or an elementary school teacher. I'm sure that plenty of people must have experienced this kind of thing when they were growing up in elementary school. One person does something wrong at recess, and so now nobody can do the thing that person was doing when they did something wrong. Well, I know at least they did that in my school where I went to elementary school. And the NHL, it kind of seems to me like they've done the exact same thing. It's like we can't trust the media to respect the rights of our players to hold their own beliefs, whether or not anybody likes them. And so we're going to deal with this collectively, and now everybody loses out. And as much as it would be nice if some of these people had the amount of self-awareness to come forward and say, it's like, well, I guess maybe this was my doing. I tried to make myself, more important to what's going on an NHL ice surface than the players are. I tried to make myself and my beliefs more important to what's going on in an NHL rink than the players who actually play the game. I guess this is on me. I guess that I did this. No, of course, none of them have that level of self-awareness. And the NHL doesn't seem to have the stones, to do the right thing, what was actually the right thing, and just bar these particular journalists from the building. So they get to go on pretending as if targeting these players for having beliefs that they don't like there was nothing wrong with that. So I guess not everything with this Pride jersey, Pride tape, whatever, ban is the way that it turned out the way that it should be. As a matter of fact, a lot of things didn't turn out the way that they should be. I have said it before. I actually think that the Hockey News already should have been on a league-wide blacklist after that stunt that they tried to pull on Ian Cole, when they basically suggested that Ian Cole should have been kicked out of hockey, should have been kicked out of the league and put out of hockey, based on allegations that, for which the accuser refused to come forward. I think that right then and there should have been enough for the NHL to take a step back and say, well, you know what? Maybe the Hockey News needs the National Hockey League a good deal more than the National Hockey League needs the Hockey News. So I hardly think that this is the first time that the NHL should have made this example out of somebody. They didn't do it the first time, and they haven't done it this time, so God knows if they're ever going to get the stones to figure out that, hey, you know what? These access journalists need the access that we give them an awful lot more than we need them. So in the meantime, when you have problems like this, I think that you're basically just going to see where the NHL is just going to clamp these things down and say, okay, nobody for anything, nothing for anybody then. Nothing for nobody. This is so much better now, isn't it? Now, thankfully, because I do think that this actually turned out pretty great, when the NHL announced earlier this season that they were also going to put the clamp down on the rainbow pride tape that some players were wearing, that some teams were using during warm-ups on their pride nights. It's what the Edmonton Oilers did. They never did a pride jersey that I can recall. They just used the pride tape. Well, they put a ban on that, and they said, well, nobody can use the pride tape either. But it just so happened that there was a loophole that has already been exploited by one player this season, where it says right in the NHL rulebook that players can use tape of any color on their sticks. So you could not only not only could any player who wants to use the Pride tape during a warm-up, any player that wants to can actually use the Pride tape during a game, if they so chose. And one guy actually did choose, one guy this season already has chosen to use the Pride tape. And the NHL has basically had to just kind of shrug their shoulders at it because, hey, it's in the rule book, he can do it. Regardless of whatever you said about this specific thing, no, he can do it. The rule book says that he can do it. So he did it. And what's especially great about that is that's something that is coming from the players. It's not coming from some jerkhole at the Hockey News or at ESPN or God knows wherever the hell it is that these things are coming out of. It's coming from the players themselves, and the players are making these choices. And instead of players choosing to opt out, we're talking about players who are choosing to opt in. And from my perspective, when I think about the way that I would like these things to be, I think that players opting in is an awful lot better than a bunch of players who are just too afraid to opt out because they're afraid of the media backlash. Of all the ways that we can say that things should be, that is exactly the way that this whole thing should be.